Hi everybody!
Recently, I made a video on why The Last of Us Part 2 Remaster is pointless. Link for that will be in the description and a pinned comment. You don't have to watch that video before watching this one, but The Last of Us does make up a core part of my argument for this video. In all honesty, Naughty Dog have lost the plot, and lost it quite heavily. This particular developer was once so good I considered them the crown jewel for Sony. I no longer feel this is the case though. I feel like the crown jewels of Sony's crown are now Insomniac Games and Sucker Punch Productions. Maybe my views on them will both change, we'll just have to wait and see. But that's a topic for another video. So why do I feel like Naughty Dog have lost their shine? If you look at the output from Naughty Dog over the last few years, it has mostly been re-releases, which, if you consider the PlayStation 5 is backwards compatible with the PS4, these remasters really don't make a lot of sense. Now, one could argue these games are getting remastered to either get junior employees experience, or used to later port the games to PC. Let's dissect the junior employees point first and see if it stands up to scrutiny, because I feel it doesn't. Part of why the junior employee argument doesn't stand up to scrutiny comes down to this. Junior employees just aren't given projects like remasters all that frequently. Even remasters at bigger studios are typically handled by mid-level employees with a couple of years of good track record on their resume. So to hand a remaster, which, let's face it, are fairly big budget as these are still AAA games, really doesn't hold up. Also, if we're being honest, Naughty Dog can do far better when it comes to projects they could come up with to get their junior employees more experience. Another argument I've seen brought up is to get all of Naughty Dog's employees familiar with the PlayStation 5 hardware, and that doesn't really hold any water for a number of reasons. For one, Naughty Dog would have been one of the first studios to know what the console was capable of, since Sony even considered them their premier studio. The architecture the PS5 runs is also X86, which the PS4 also ran as well. Plus, the vast majority of computers run this architecture. So for all intents and purposes, that particular argument is invalid, given X86 was chosen for the PS4 and PS5 to make development easier and to reduce the time required to develop games. Plus, you have to consider how long games take to develop in this day and age. On average, one game takes 3 to 5 years of development time. This isn't like the 90s or 2000s where a developer could squeeze out a game in a year fairly consistently. For the health of the game developers, this extended period of time is probably for the better, as it means crunch culture is less of an issue. In the past, both Naughty Dog and Insomniac were known for extensive crunch culture. Insomniac probably more so, as they were taking a very Japanese approach to game development, even going as far as having sleeping bags in their offices, just so developers could get in a couple extra hours of work to get the game out on time and through the door. Though if we do some digging, you'll find Naughty Dog crunched really hard for The Last of Us Part 2. So I've explored why it really can't be a case of them wanting to get junior employees experience, and how it can't be Naughty Dog getting used to new hardware. So let's deconstruct why it can't be them needing to port it to PC. So some people have suggested they're using the PS5 to have the game be ready for the forthcoming PC port. I don't feel this holds up very well either, for the simple fact they could literally port a PS4 game to PC without any issues. Take for example Horizon Zero Dawn, 2018's God of War, Days Gone, or Death Stranding, and a couple of other games. Those were all PS4 titles originally, so seriously, use your brains people. The assets already exist in the PS4 version. There is literally no point in porting these games as remasters to the PS5 just to port them to PC. That's a massive inefficiency. Also, you have to realize inefficiencies are killer in all industries. These inefficiencies lead to loss of revenue. Lost revenue means less budget for future projects. Less budget means a slip in quality, and it's just a downward spiral from there. Basically, an inefficient workflow leads to death. Naughty Dog can literally use those same resources just to do straight ports to PC, so what purpose do these PS5 ports actually serve? They don't. They're cynical cash grabs at best, and I'm being generous with that one. I'm gonna take heat for this, but fuck it. This has to be said, and it's something I didn't touch on with my video on why The Last of Us Part 2 Remaster is bloody stupid. At this point in time, Naughty Dog are creatively bankrupted as a company. I say this because for the last decade and change, Naughty Dog have been working exclusively on sequels, no new IPs, and very little experimentation with the games they do release. On its own, this is pretty bad, but when you compound it with the fact they've effectively just recycled games with remakes and remasters, it's inexcusable. To me, that shows upper management are out of ideas and are just coasting on brand recognition alone, which isn't going to last forever, especially if they keep releasing divisive game after divisive game. Uncharted 4 didn't really divide the fanbase that much. But there is a rub to that one. Uncharted 4 left a lot of fans feeling mildly taken out of the experience because there was less focus on what the core aspects of Uncharted was. Also, if I'm being honest, that project really lacked passion. That lack of passion really shines through when you see that Druckmann retired the character of Nathan Drake. Now, you have to remember Drake has been a fan favorite of PlayStation fans since the early days of the PS3. I would argue that Nathan Drake was the consensus face of that era of PlayStation. It's not hard to see why either. Drake is a good-looking and charismatic character. Amy Hennig, the creative force behind Naughty Dog at that time, stated Nate was supposed to be an Indiana Jones-like figure. I would say mission accomplished. He's suave in an awkward way. He's also very charismatic, and the snarky banter is always entertaining. That's what made Drake a popular character during the PS3 days. Even if people couldn't identify with him, he was at least a likable protagonist, one you could actually root for, even if some of the things he did were morally questionable or questionable ethics-wise. Whereas all of the characters from The Last of Us are unlikable pieces of shit. Tess even says as much in one of the cutscenes, which we'll be playing on screen now.
Guess what? We're shitty people, Joel. It's been that way for a long time.
No, we are survivors.
This is our chance.
It is over, Tess!
If that doesn't sum up The Last of Us right there, I don't know what does. Now, I know The Last of Us was intended to challenge the player. That's fine. Games that challenge us do need to exist. The Last of Us 1 and 2 accomplished that. They aren't to my taste. Will I bash someone for liking these games? No, because I have something called class. Something a lot of fans of this franchise just don't have. So, if you're one of the respectful fans from the Last of Us community, I thank you for making it this far into the video. If you've liked it so far, why not consider hitting the subscribe button? But the point I'm driving at is, Naughty Dog no longer have the creative juices they once had. During the PS1, Crash Bandicoot was literally a trailblazer. Even though it was a 3D platformer, it had 2D sensibilities, and it was one of the first 3D platformers on the market. Was the first game the best example of the fledgling genre? Fuck no. But it was fresh, and it was different. It was definitely inspired by the Tex Avery era Looney Tunes cartoons. But that's fine. Every piece of media takes inspiration from somewhere else. These rant-style video essays, mildly inspired by wrestling promos. Let's continue on with the point I'm trying to make though. Creativity was found within Naughty Dog games up until the PS4 era. During the PS2, you had them working on the Jack games. The first one is the black sheep of the family since it was a standard collectathon title. Sure, it wasn't fresh, but you could see Naughty Dog wanted to expand the scope of their games, and this was just their way of doing it. The second and third games, they were Grand Theft Auto clones for kids. On the face of it, that doesn't seem that creative. But when you look at that era, that idea was groundbreaking. As for the PS3, the technology was finally there for Naughty Dog and other developers to explore the cinematic experiences so many developers had wanted to undertake since the advent of 3D gaming. Sure, the Uncharted games were very iterative, mechanically speaking, but they had a creative force behind them simply for the fact they wanted to bring the globe-trotting experience of an Indiana Jones film to the home console. Something that just wasn't doable before that point in time. As for the first Last of Us title, I will give it some kudos for being a creative game despite my no longer liking it. The creativity came from the fact the game was designed to challenge the morality of the player. Admittedly, it was blunt force trauma in its execution, but again, it was different from its contemporaries. The effects of the first game are still being felt to this day thanks to it being challenging. A lot of indie titles have tried to capture that nihilistic walking sim experience. That's partially where The Last of Us Part 2 falls, as flat as one of my jokes.
Well, at least you admit your joke telling is horrible. Gotta give you that much.
The shock value of the game being brutal and nihilistic had worn off. Sure, Joel getting his head bashed in with a golf club was visceral, and it was the catalyst for a lot of fan backlash, but that's not why I hate the game. I just didn't find it fun. Also, its brand of nihilism had worn off for me significantly. There have been so many cinematic gaming experiences with similar tone and feel that it just no longer stands out. As for Naughty Dog themselves, their creative bankruptcy comes down to them merely iterating on established formulas and not really pushing the boundaries of what they could do gameplay-wise. Uncharted 4, iterative on the previous 3, and not as fun. The Last of Us Part 2 was pretty much more of the same, with some mild tweaks, again, making a game that was already not very fun that much less so. At this point, the company needs to break out of their creative funk with a brand new IP, and of a totally different style than either Uncharted or The Last of Us. If you look at Naughty Dog as a company, they really are directionless. It comes down to their over-reliance on remakes and remasters. Where is the multiplayer for The Last of Us Part 2? We were promised that, and it hasn't materialized. Talk about a waste of resources. Also, if they do have some kind of PS5 project in the works, we haven't heard what it is, and we're already 3 years into the PS5's lifecycle, and they haven't announced anything that's actually a new game. By this point, we already knew of Uncharted 4 and The Last of Us Part 2, projects that didn't materialize until the mid and late stages for the PS4. It seems like the inmates are presently running the asylum, and Neil Druckmann is the head inmate. So even if they announce something, it's not like it's going to materialize until the PS5's end of life, which isn't a good thing for Naughty Dog financially speaking. Now we know Naughty Dog have a sister studio set up just like Insomniac Games does, but look at what the Insomniacs are cooking up for us. At this point, they're so efficient we effectively get a game a year. 2020 had both Spider-Man Remastered and Miles Morales. A few months later, in 2021, we got Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, and Spider-Man 2 came out earlier this year. Now, one could argue part of that efficiency is down to reuse of assets, which is just smart when you think about it. Work smarter, not harder. Also, back in the day, our games had reused assets all the time, and we liked it. So this brings us to my final discussion point, why I'm fucking done with Naughty Dog. You have to keep in mind what I'm saying comes from a point of passion. I've loved Naughty Dog since I was 7 years old. I could accept a few games that disappointed me here and there, but after 2 massive disappointments in my eyes, and the fact my tastes in games have clearly changed from what Naughty Dog are making, basically has me seeing the writing on the walls. They're no longer the developer I grew up with. Now I know tastes are meant to change, and that's a good thing, but with how Naughty Dog has changed, it's no longer for me. Also, if it's yet another sequel to either Uncharted or The Last of Us, I just don't have any interest. Uncharted 4 bored me, as did The Last of Us Part 2, and those are the cardinal sins in gaming to me. If I'm bored, your game failed at the one thing it's supposed to actually do: provide entertainment. Now I will admit, if they revisit Jak and Daxter, there is a small possibility I'd check that out when the game goes on sale, or if someone were to gift it to me. If they made a brand new IP, I'd give it a shot. Would I get it right away? Probably not. But if it had that old Naughty Dog charm of playful hopefulness, then yes, I'd consider playing it almost instantly. But as it stands right now, I just can't support Naughty Dog, not when I find their games boring and self-indulgent. I've now enlightened you on why Naughty Dog has lost the plot. You're welcome. Until next time, keep blazing that trail.